Hello and welcome to the Limitless show once again on this wonderful Wednesday evening. Thank you so much for joining me over here. We are nearing the end of this year, only 2 more weeks to go. I'm sure you must have set a lot of goals for yourself that you want to achieve in the coming year, that is going to be the year 2022. If not, please go ahead, set your goals, start working towards them, and start achieving them. I hope with this show I have been able to add tons of value by bringing such phenomenal guests on the show, like the one I have today. Today I have Prisha Kirby with us, and she is an octogenarian who has seen life through different lenses, in different avatars, and she would be able to share so much of her wisdom with us that I just cannot wait to bring her on. But to just give a gist of who she is the co-director for Education for Life. Education for Life was an entity which was started by Swami Kriyananda on the guidelines given by none other than the author of the book Autobiography of a Yogi. And it was in tandem with how the children should have been educated. And she is one of those people who's carrying the legacy forward. She has also done a lot of other stuff, but you will get to know that once she joins us over here. So with a big round of applause, let's bring on Prisha. Hey Prisha, thank you so much for joining me over here. I'm so glad to have you over here.
Likewise.
Amazing. So, Prisha, you started your career into something which was like completely different. That was instructional design and sociology. And then, from doing so much of different stuff, how did you end up being with EFL and, doing something totally different from there? So, what has the journey been like?
Actually, it was not all that different because it was education. I guess I've been in one form or another of education and training in both the academic and the corporate world. And
Mm-hmm.
instructional design, well, you know, I was a history major in college, and that was because I wanted to write. I've written ever since I was a little kid, and I knew somehow I would be doing something in writing. So I figured maybe I better find out what's been happening in the world all this time so I could write better. Then I realized I was focusing on the people, that is, well, history's people, but I meant in the sense of what are the common people doing? I didn't really care so much about all the battles. And that's sociology. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? How are they doing it? And I got interested in teaching college because I found out, I don't know if it's like this anymore in America, which is where I'm from, but it wasn't necessary to have any education credits to teach. Actually, at the time, I was quite happy because I thought education credits were kind of silly. But, well, they're not silly, but the way they're taught and what they're taught is not the best. At least
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't. And so I was able to just step into the classroom. But
Mm-hmm.
there is a flip side to that. All of a sudden, I realized I really don't know how to keep a roll book. I don't know how to grade things that the students do. I was very creative in coming up with assignments,
Mm-hmm.
but it's one thing to do that and then to sit down and say, well, wait a minute, did this student follow my directions? Did they even understand my directions? So then
Mm-hmm.
I got interested in instructional design because I said I would like to write books that students would understand and to do activities. At the time, college teaching was really not all that experiential. And to make a long story short, you would have to perhaps understand that I'm in a group called Ananda. I
Mm-hmm.
joined it quite late in life. That's another story. But it was through the book, I'll hold it up here so people can see it, Education for Life. I came across this in doing a project for somebody that hired me often to do writing projects. And
Mm-hmm.
this is how I discovered not just Education for Life, but also
Mm-hmm.
Ananda. And little by little, I got drawn toward Ananda. So, let me see, what were you asking me? It was a kind of, oh yeah, why, how did you get involved in all these projects? Well, I, again, long story, but I ended up over here as a volunteer in India. I never expected that I would be doing anything more than just 6 months. And then they asked if I would stay, and I said, all right. And I've been here 16 years now.
Wow.
So little by little, I got into Education for Life, and there are some others who are doing it too. You've had some on your show. Some of the people that are here in our audience are probably now very much aware of Education for Life. I think
Yes.
I'll stop there because I know it's time for another question.
Oh, that's absolutely all right, Prisha. Till the time, I mean, you have so much to share. I know that we have Niyati over here with us. She says good evening.
Mhm.
And so, my question to you is basically, Prisha, you have taught other teachers also. I know that for a decade you have been training the other teachers in the practices and principles of EFL. So, and that is tremendous. So if I'm sure there's so much to teach them, but if I ask you as a summary to sum it up, what would be the key points you would tell me what EFL is all about?
Probably the main one would be you have to teach from the inside out. This is not something I knew when I started teaching. I wanted to have a friendly atmosphere in the classroom. I wanted it to be interesting, but
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about teaching from the inside out. And even
Mm-hmm.
mentioning that, I know won't make sense if I don't explain that this is really what conscious education is all
Mm-hmm.
about. You ideally should have some kind of a spiritual practice. If you simply approach the students as objects to be graded and to be um, hopefully processed out of your school with some degree of understanding of your subject, it isn't enough. And that is why so many students today are rebelling. It isn't like they just started doing that. They began doing it, I think, around the same time I started teaching. Like, we don't want to just learn. We don't want you to just pour stuff into our minds. We want the learning to mean something.
Right.
And if you are spiritual and you approach the students from your center and
Mm-hmm.
you are teaching not just intellectually, but from the heart, from the mind, with the emotions, even physically for the little kids. Uh, we teach in a very holistic way, but we are doing it based on the needs of the kids. And so for the little kids, of course, they've got to move around. You can't or shouldn't say, sit in your chair and do not move. I mean, that's just
Right.
cruel, but it has happened all too often, as you know. And
Yes.
according to the stage of maturity, that would be the chronological ages of the students, we can pretty well tell what to do with them. So, physical movement for the first 6 years, then we deal with feelings for the next 6 years up until 12. Then, with the will, what can I do? Please challenge me. Can I do better? That sort of thing for 12 to 18. And finally, intellectual 18 to 24. But that doesn't mean that we don't ever teach in a way that you would say touches on the feelings or the emotions, that is emotions, or the will or the intellect at the earlier ages. It's just that the focus is on whichever of those four modalities or tools for learning, we often call them because they really are tools,
Mm-hmm.
would be the right one. So you asked me what it would be like to train teachers. And in EFL, we help the teachers to understand that and to work with it. This is, I think, one of the main reasons that EFL is different from other
Mm-hmm.
approaches like you no doubt know about Montessori and Waldorf or Steiner and
Yes,
many
yes,
others.
yes,
The other thing that is different about education for life is working with energy. That too is a form of consciousness, you could say.
yes.
But anyway, I'll kind of leave it there for the now, for the moment.
Wow, beautiful. So that's a beautiful point that you just said, Prisha, that energy is also a form of consciousness, but rather I would like to say that we are energy beings. If we look at, I mean, the fact that we are, except that we are not this body, we are not this mind, we are actually just the souls, and everything around us, including ourselves, is energy. The whole universe is nothing but energy. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're working with energy, that's a beautiful thing, because if you, I think high energy means being in that high state all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you work with energy? Can you elaborate on that? How do you work with energy? What is your methodology or means of doing that?
If I could show something on screen, I have seen that you've got a tool here. I can just press share and I can share something.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Da, 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 da. Okay, it doesn't look, oh, it's on my computer. I have not used this particular program before. Well, maybe I can't. It's okay. I'll describe with hand movements. So we have something that really corresponds to the three gunas. This is basically what it's all about. But we don't use that term. We have what we call specific gravity. And think of a, well, I have a glass of water right here. If I put something in, if it is heavy, it sinks. If it is not heavy, heavy, but not real light either, it comes up a little, maybe up to here in the glass. And if it is light, it doesn't weigh much, it comes up here.
Right,
So really, this is a beautiful analogy which Swami Kriyananda used based on things that Yogananda had taught him about his method of teaching. What do we mean by heavy and light is that heavy sinks down, light goes way up, and then in the middle, we have what we call ego active. I kind of wish we had a better word for it, but it does mean that the ego's really doing things. So it isn't like heavy, not interested in things or pulling everybody down with negativity. But on the other
mm-hmm.
hand, it hasn't gotten up to the top yet, where people who are light would be more positive. They would see the value in whatever they're learning. They would offer to
Right,
help. Ego active, it's sort of like, well, what's in it for me? And
right,
so it can go up and down. If we have ego active kids, and we usually do in any classroom, but especially as we move into the years 12 to 18, which are the years we work with the will, the kids could, ego active kids could go down or they could go up. That's the challenge for those who teach the students at that age. So, how do we work with the energy in that way? It means that in addition to thinking of the age and therefore the stage of maturity, there are four, which I talked about a little, we also talk about their specific gravity. And what we try to do as teachers is take where they are as a starting point. We don't expect somebody who's heavy to suddenly just jump up and be light.
Right.
They just can't do it. So we
Right.
have to lead them through another stage of the middle, and we reward them uh, different ways. You know, the star chart where kids get golden stars according to what they do, or
Mhm.
maybe candy or things that they want to do, they get to do. This is more for the heavy kids
Right.
and the lower regions of ego activity. But as they move up and they get to be where they're in the middle, ego active, then we reward them more with praise and opportunity to show what they can do
Mhm.
and pat on the back and that sort of thing. But when they get up to light, that doesn't work. If we keep rewarding them, in fact, that would pull them down. So for them, we give them opportunities to help. We appreciate their work. Uh, Very often in an EFL school, and we are filled with light kids because it's parents who understand, light parents that is, who understand the value of the kind of education we offer. The children of light parents are usually going to be light, not always, but usually. And
Mhm.
so we have a wonderful opportunity in our schools to have the light kids work with the others. And of course, we have to worry about, we don't want to turn them into teachers' pets either. That's not good for them or the others. But anyway, we, as you can see, then we work with the heavy, ego active, and the light at different, in different ways.
Right. Wow, this is beautiful. I think, we call it in India, we call it tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic.
Yep.
So the ego active is rajasic, and the one which is down at the bottom is the tamasic, and the one which is lighter is the sattvic. So I think
Yes.
these are the gunas that we are talking about. Amazing, amazing. What a beautiful way of dealing with people and helping them come up. And frankly speaking, I have seen, being a parent of, a daughter who goes to the EFL. This is like phenomenal because the kind of freedom they get to express themselves, be themselves. I have not seen any school promote that kind of a freedom. So that's something that is to be cherished. As a parent, I definitely cherish it a lot, and I have seen her evolve. And I'm sure that there's a long way to go. It's only the beginning. So thank you so much, Prisha, for sharing that.
It is only the beginning. And the interesting thing is, it's also the beginning for us teachers. Like we say that we are mutual learners with the students. It's not that, we are the teachers and you just listen and do what we say or else.
Yes.
It is a joy to be working with the children. We learn from them, sometimes simply because they didn't understand an assignment. And we say, well, why didn't you understand? Well, it turns out we didn't make it clear. This is where instructional design comes in. And I use it all the time in trying to think of better ways to teach. Let me, if I can, just for a moment, tell you that when I first read Swamiji's book and came to the chapter on specific gravity, which he calls progressive development, I had no idea. I was not raised to know anything about the gunas, and he never used that term. I thought, oh, this is so amazing. I wish I had known it when I started teaching. I could have done so much better. Well, I got to India, or no, I shouldn't say that. I began when I joined Ananda to understand the more Eastern approach to reality. And suddenly, when I learned about the gunas, I said, that's what he's talking about. I was
Right.
absolutely amazed.
Yes. So true, so true. So now, what, uh, you know, you went through so many different phases, and being part of universities and colleges, and now being part of EFL. So what gives you more joy and more satisfaction? If I can ask you in this way, let me reframe the question, that do you think you have found your ikigai? I mean, being here for 16 long years, 16 years is a very good time. So do you think this is where you found your ikigai, and this is where you saw that there was that purpose which was calling you, and you are finally being a part of that purpose?
I would say that it is true to a large degree, but it isn't like just finding it now. I understood that writing and teaching or training, because remember, I was also in the corporate world where I did quite a bit of corporate training. And
Correct.
so I always felt drawn to that. And I think it's mainly, even though I love teaching and working with children and adults for that matter, I do find I'm more in the zone when I'm actually creating assignments and things for the students. I wish I had more time to write books and to come up with games and activities. Somehow I get carried away. I can't remember the time when I do that. It isn't, though, like, I know that might sound very academic and removed, but it isn't, because I really feel connected immediately to the people for whom I'm writing or doing the instructional design. But it is all coming together, and in a way that I would say this is beautiful to find it so late in life. Obviously, I don't have lots and lots more years, at least I don't think I do. And to know that here now, at this phase of my life, I get to be totally joyful because of what I'm doing.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. So again, another thing, Prisha, is as I I'm saying from the beginning of this show, that you have seen different decades in your life. I mean, from the time of the time of Second World War, and now to till here. What which was the best decade, do you think, in all the decades that you have seen, which has been the most beautiful decade according to you?
Anshu, I don't think anybody could really answer that because there were good things and not so good things about each decade. The Second World War years, there was everybody coming home, able to start a family, settle down. It had been a horrible war. Um, Values were good, except in, you remember, I'm from America. We certainly had racial problems then. And so we have to admit, and also from the standpoint of what we did with the Native Americans, we do have a wonderful history in many ways of doing great things. We certainly helped in the Second World War, but then we have to look carefully at what happened in our historical development. We just threw off the natives from their land and took it over. And we broke treaties. We were not very nice to Black people many times. And so there we go, where you have the plus and the minus for the 40s.
Right,
The
right.
50s, mm, you know, it was a big transition, and 60s especially. The 50s were still, I would say, people were much more polite as they were in the 40s. In the 60s, as the young people began to throw off what they thought were shackles of institutions, which could involve religion and education and even family expectations, marriage. Um, I would certainly say that was quite mixed. it was very nerve-wracking to see a lot of the things in the 60s. On the other hand, I loved the folk music, and I would definitely not identify as a hippie. Interestingly, a lot of the founders of Ananda would identify and did come having thrown off all this stuff. I'm one of the few who was exactly the opposite. And as I would see these things happening, I got very worried. And then the 70s and 80s, it was kind of like more of the same. You had, of course, it was important for women to gain a certain amount of freedom, but on the other hand, they were, just like this about marriage and even kids. And now we have the 90s and 2000. That's at the end of the 90s is when I discovered Ananda and began to get involved. And I joined it in 2002. When the millennium changed, I had a whole new community and a
Yes.
whole new, let's say, a spiritual life too. I have had, as you say, many experiences and a whole lot of stuff that I have seen. Um, Internet, I was delighted when I saw the internet coming, and I did kind of see what was going to happen with it. It was delightful. That was one of the real pluses of the late 80s and the 90s, to watch that happen and to realize that we have come so far. Television was just coming in when I was not a kid. They didn't have it yet until I was about a teenager. It was there, but it wasn't for sale and it wasn't something everybody had. And then to remember, my own parents came from the age of radio. In fact, they met at a radio station they were both working at. And so they only knew radio. I knew radio and a little bit of TV.
Yes.
And then to have, word processors come, you didn't have to type in a manual typewriter
Yes.
like I learned.
Yes.
It is fun to talk about the inventions that came along in your life, or to ask your parents about what they have seen, as you're asking me to go back and
Right. Unfortunately, I mean, yeah, I do not have both my parents with me anymore. But then I remember radio. Even I have grown up on radio. When I was very small, my aunts and uncles used to hear a lot of radio. TV was something which came in, a little later. And yeah, now the whole world is a small global village, and it's amazing that no one seems far away. We can look at each other's houses, what state we are in. We can do everything that seemed like impossible at one point of time. So I think it's the world has changed in a good way. Yeah, I think with everything there are pros and cons. So it's the same with the technology, but yeah, life has become much easier. So Prisha, you have also, I think you have been kind of trying to connect the similarities between different religions, like maybe Christianity and Hinduism. So what similarities did you find between them? And what is the message that you tried spreading? Because I think you were doing some educational religious programs that you have planned and conducted. So, what similarities did you find, and what were the key messages that you spread with it?
well, I have to explain a little bit. I didn't plan to do what we're calling connection. That was not exactly where I was coming from. My spiritual training was a little unusual. When my father and mother married, he was a Catholic and she was a Protestant, but she took
Hmm.
lessons in the Catholic Church and was trying to uh, work out to become one. And she never quite did that, but she was very open to it. I got sent to Catholic school from the beginning, and I loved it. And all of my life, I was a very happy Catholic. I never went through what so many others do about what is the meaning of life and is there more than one religion that's a good one and that sort of thing. I was curious. I did get interested just to find out a little bit about other religions, but that was not where I was coming from exactly. And I did in the church, I worked on many programs to help teach at adult and child levels, mostly adults though. I was more involved with
Mhm.
adults in our what we call parish programs. That would be your neighborhood church or the one you go to. And I wasn't particularly drawn to the Hindu religion. It was through that book, this Education for Life book that I mentioned. It was only when I came to this, and in order to get to the book, to read it, it was online at the Ananda site. So I didn't have to buy the book. I could go to the website. And as I
Mhm.
would go through the website, I would see things that looked kind of Christian and kind of Hindu. I was saying, what on earth is this? My main focus was to get to the book, but on the other hand, I couldn't help seeing things as I went. So then I, one day I decided I'm going to call out to California. I'm from the East Coast, so it was a long distance call. I want to connect with this Swami Kriyananda who wrote this book and just tell him how much I enjoyed it. And I did. Well, he wasn't in California. By then, he had started the group in Italy, but we were starting a correspondence by email. And eventually, I began asking questions that were no longer about education for life. And he began to answer a little, and I began to read more. And I found that even though Hinduism to me at the time was kind of strange, and definitely, to be very honest, I was a little nervous about it because, from a Christian standpoint, you don't have 20,000 gods to deal with, and you don't do pujas, and you do, of course, things that are similar in your church, which is like a temple, but still. But I'm one of these people that when I get into something, I kind of want to know as much as I can about it if I'm drawn to it to find out more. So, long story short, I one day decided I'm going out to Ananda and take part in a program they have called the Karma Yoga program. You can go to Ananda Village, which is the founding location of Ananda, and you can work, and they will let you go to classes for free. Lots of classes out there for visitors. And I just wanted to know more about it. So I found myself being very drawn, and yet I couldn't put it together because certain things, certainly like reincarnation, that's not a Christian tradition. But as I began to look into it, I could see, like, yeah, I guess it could be. I mean, I'm sure to a Hindu audience, I'm sure most of the audience would be here. You would probably say, well, what else? But from a Christian standpoint, no way, can't be. And yet I began to see that it could go together. Christianity does not really say much about reincarnation. It's not like you must not believe this terrible thing, but rather it's sort of like, no, it didn't happen, end of subject. And never, you don't hear sermons about it like, do not believe this awful truth. But there were other things like the role of Christ is very, very difficult to put together. Was he the only Son of God or not? And what about heaven and hell? And so these things were much tougher to put together. And as I mentioned to you in what I wrote to you when you asked for a little information, to be honest, I still am putting certain things together, but I also realize, and I know this is a very Hindu thing, you can believe and leave things open at the same time. You can say, okay, I don't understand everything yet, but I can see that if we keep going, things are going to get a little bit clearer and they will go together more. I don't know about the role of Christ. To be very honest, I am not sure that we can ever put that 100% together. And in my own way of approaching God, people sometimes will ask me, what is your religion? Especially people who knew me when I was in America. And
Yes.
I would say I haven't left the church, but I have expanded where I was. Most of the people here in the Ananda community would say, well, my religion is self-realization. And I would say, I'm certainly in that. I feel more of a community with my brothers and sisters in Ananda than in many of the churches I was in. Do I understand what's going on? No. I just feel that God worked with me in an interesting way. He drew me through a book on education. I'm
Yes.
sure that if I met Yogananda, if it was 1920, I probably would go to his talks and I'd be very drawn to him, but I would definitely not have been as attracted as, for me anyway, through this book. So I can't say now, addressing your immediate question, I'm not, let's say, somebody who has made, I can't think of the word I want to say, but I am trying to put Hinduism and Christianity together, but it was mainly for myself at first. But now I see that there actually are groups. There is an ashram that I went to in Tamil Nadu, which has
Okay.
Catholic people and
Mm-hmm.
Hindu people living together and working out some of
Mm-hmm.
these things, these questions. And I see that in the church, certainly yoga has come. Of course, now there's some churches, they're mainly Protestant, um, where they say yoga, no, no, that's going to open the door to Hinduism. But I think well, I'm not sure I should say most churches, but many, many, yoga is a program that they actually have. And as my focus here in India has become education so much, I wish I
Mm-hmm.
had more time to get involved more with that particular ashram. It's called um, Sachidananda. It has
Oh.
another name also, Shantivanam. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. And there are a number of other groups that have started more from the Christian side, but trying to reach out and to work together. And I wish I had more time to really do that because I'm not one of the people who is noted here in India, certainly, or anywhere, as a great connector, but I would really love to do that. I think it's something that if we can work together more as Christians and Hindus to look beyond some of the more external things, certainly to what is Christ consciousness. I think we can certainly agree, Christians and Protestants, and for that matter, Jews and Muslims, if we sit down together and talk about what are we really saying in our religions, we do often find that there is something there that we could call Christ consciousness. And even though the role of Christ will perhaps not get solved anywhere near as easily, maybe never completely, but that's the beautiful journey that we're on to try to understand, to go beyond creeds. Swami Kriyananda wrote lots of music, and he's got one song that says, "No creed completely defines you to God." And this is something that we should agree on and not just say it's only this much that we should accept of another religion.
So true. Finally, I think, I at least believe that there is one God. It's just that we have given forms according to our own consciousness, and we look at God in the same image that we have created. I mean, it's a story that we have created for ourselves. Everyone has a different story, but finally, it's the same creator, the same divine person who's the father of the whole universe, everyone. So, and of course, definitely all the religions must be talking the same thing. We have just created the boundaries around ourselves. And there are, I think everyone says the same thing. There's a lot of similarity rather than differences. The differences might be minuscule, more in rituals. The differences will be in the rituals, not in the philosophy.
Well, to be honest, in the philosophy, there are some things, like I've mentioned, the role of Christ is one of the biggest ones that we can't overlook. I would not, even though I want very, very much to reach out and to help bring people together and to applaud when it is being done, we shouldn't just say all we have to do is work together and forget the externals, because to many people, what we might say is an external is not an external. It is part of the philosophy. And so we have to be open to people so that we don't say, well, you're just, too narrow. You are dealing with the externals. You say they're important, but they're not. We cannot do that. We need to be honest about what we believe and to give freedom to the others to work with us. But that's what I think is just like education. I love, always did, even as a child, I love educational discussions and even arguments if people were respectful of each other, because sometimes you find out that you thought you knew something and no, you didn't, because somebody else has got it more clear. But I don't at the same time just want to say, well, let's just forget all the rituals and the externals, because they're very symbolic too. That was one of the things I really loved going to the Catholic churches, Christmas and Easter especially. Beautiful candles, beautiful um, things that we did. We call, in the Catholic Church, we call the ritual the liturgy. And that means, actually, you mentioned stories. It is, in the Catholic Church, it's the telling of a story. The Mass, the ritual that a Catholic goes to every week, maybe even every day, depending. Um, you tell a story. You read from the Bible, and you have a sermon about it. And ideally, your family will do things at home, and they will carry on the story. To me, stories are a very, very important part of any religion. If you don't have stories and if you don't celebrate in a ritualistic way, you kind of miss that. That is something, even though I've been to a number of more Protestant churches that don't deal with that kind of thing, I think they're kind of missing something. Even though you don't want to get bogged down and, just do the same thing week after week as if you were a robot, that wouldn't work either.
Correct. Right, Prisha. So now, basically what happens is you are now a part of EFL and you are totally into children's education, how they should be taught. But, if I talk about in your free time, what are the other things that you love doing that kind of energizes you, brings that passion out in you? Because I see you are a very, very passionate human being, very passionate. And that was the thing that drew me towards you, because I could see that age is never a boundary, a reason for you to become like sad, or just kind of give up on life or anything. I think you have so much of zest for that life and all the beautiful things in life. So, what are the things that you love doing generally uh, i- in your life?
Well, you said free time. I wish I had a little bit more. We have two cats where I live, and I've always loved pets. And these two are very sweet, very mischievous, but delightful. So spending time with them. And I don't do it so much anymore, but I play the guitar and I love singing, and they could be camp songs. I love camping. I'm telling you what I loved to do in the past, and in my mind, I'm still doing them. I can remember things, so it's not quite like doing them now, but when I remember or look at pictures, um, all those memories come back. So I'm reliving my story. And photography, since I mentioned photos, I love doing that. I sort of live with a camera whenever we have things at Ananda, like satsangs, or recently there was a birthday party. I just pick up the camera and start doing it, and it's like it's part of me. So I enjoy that. Um, Writing and oh gosh, you know what I do in my free time a lot is purchase online. I wouldn't call it a hobby, but it's so much easier than going out to a store. And even
Yes,
though I hate to make Amazon and Flipkart richer than they are now, I have to admit I'm very often on my mobile phone, looking at products and finding out about them. And it's actually kind of fun. So I would
yeah.
call it maybe not a hobby, but something.
You like exploring, I mean, this part. It's so much easier. Like it's
Exploring,
like window shopping. It's like window shopping.
yes.
Earlier we had to go out of our houses into the malls or into the shops and see the things out there. Now we can just do that sitting at the comfort of our homes and on our mobile phones.
Yeah, I just feel at the same time the minus to that plus is I know that there are a lot of shopkeepers, family shopkeepers, who are not able to earn an income the way they used to because there is Amazon and Flipkart. But I have to be honest, and of course, with COVID, we all have been inside so much. So it is wonderful to have that opportunity.
Yes.
Music, though, I suppose if I had to pick one thing that I would say throughout my
Hmm.
life would have been a hobby, I would pick the guitar and singing in church, singing in temples, singing in occasionally composing things. I don't do that very much, but I have written a few songs, camp songs, and camp itself. And you mentioned exploring, all of that put together, singing and exploring together. Um, yeah, I guess I'd pick those things as hobbies.
Wonderful, wonderful. Amazing. So I know you have done quite a lot of different things. You have also been a webmaster with, doing a lot of different stuff with Ananda. I think helping them with their sites and all. So I think you are pretty techie also. You are good with handling technology and moving your way around with
Well,
technology.
yeah, I'm not an advanced webmaster. It would be more I approached that work. I was asked to do it. I didn't volunteer when I got here to India as a volunteer, but I had learned how to create online courses. And to do that, I had to know how to go through a website and then how to work with the web technology. So, from the standpoint of being able to do things um, with the web, I was able to do it from the knowledge that I had, but if there was an emergency, like one time we were hacked in
Hmm?
Ananda, and I would have to reach out to others who could handle that. But teaching, I taught word processing, spreadsheets, database during some of my um,
Right.
training. And even now, I love typing. I say sometimes I think with my fingers. I know some people prefer to write out whatever they're writing. Me, I find being able to type. My mother insisted that I go to learn typing the year after my high school because I was a year younger than most of the other kids. And she said, "We are going to send you to college, but we want you to go to business school first." And I said, "No way. I did not want that." But it's one of these things. I'm so glad I did it because if I couldn't type, I would have never been able to get through school, especially going on for a doctorate. That's a lot of years where you have to write things. And if I had to write, my wrist would just get to where it hurt by having to write. But being able to type, it just opened up a whole new world. And now, and I'm talking about touch typing, not, we call it Hunt and Peck typing.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, I'm technical, but not in the same way that somebody who was a computer major in college would be.
Right. Right. So another thing, I mean, Prisha, we are kind of just getting on to 8:30. Is it okay if we are 5 minutes above the time?
Sure.
Is that fine? Because I could not ask you the question about, I think you have done your dissertation on the different learning styles. And so I wanted you to throw some light on, what did you find out? What were your discoveries? And, a little, you want to talk about that? Because I
Okay.
think you had a national publication also around that. So a little bit of wisdom, if you can share with us.
So I found out about something called learning style.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, well, the earlier name they called how you learn was cognitive style. And it was pretty much your left brain, right brain dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
And then little by little, I noticed that some of the people who were doing research or they were writing about their things on cognitive style, they wouldn't be citing each other. And then learning style became a little bit more of a common word. And that meant a little bit more than just right brain, left brain. It
Mm-hmm.
would sometimes get involved with, like, does a student need to be taking something to drink or eat while learning, while
Mm-hmm.
studying? Does a student need a warm or a cold environment? Obviously, this is very, very different. And I got fascinated by all of these different ways of measuring and talking about how we learn. And I decided that my dissertation would be on whether we could change learning style, because another thing that was pretty well accepted in those days, and well, largely even now, is that you never completely change your learning style. You might expand it, but like I, for instance, am very visual. I cannot learn a language just by hearing it. I love
Mm-hmm.
languages, I speak several, but
Mm-hmm.
if I didn't have a book and see the words, I couldn't learn. Other people, they just listen and they get the words immediately. Still, other people, not so much
Mm-hmm.
learn languages, but still other people need to move around and to do things. So I was thinking, if we wanted to just teach people, especially children, in the style that they are basically good at, that's nice, but it can't always work. I mean, if I, as a visual teacher, can't reach the students who are more oral students,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then then what? So I began to think, like, I would like to see what we can do in instructional design somehow to help kids, and for that matter, even ourselves as adults, to expand our style. Can it be done? Well, a lot of the people who were writing would say, no, just keep working with the style. Don't try
Mm-hmm.
to change it. It is a given, it's a gift. It is
Mm-hmm.
not negative thing, but it is a gift, and let's just work with that. But I tried to find if we could do it. And I know we don't have a lot of time, so I don't want to get bogged down in that, but I will just say that it has been one of the main things that I've been interested in, and I do try to use it with the students, um, the ones that I taught in university in sociology and in
Mm-hmm.
training, and to some extent with our younger kids here in the EFL school.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. So I would let you go, Prisha. But last thing, what were the values with which you were raised? And now that you are, far away from that time, have those values changed over a period of time? Or I mean, have they gotten expanded, or they have totally gotten shifted? Has that happened?
I don't think they have shifted away from anything I learned. I was raised to be respectful, uh, to listen carefully, not to interrupt people, to do my best. On the other hand, I don't remember my parents ever complaining when my math grades were not quite as they should have been. That was not a gift I got. Um, they have expanded, I suppose, especially as I think about my own approach to spirituality. At one time, I would have not been as open as I became to other religions, even though I would have been very curious about them. Whereas now and this is not recent, but some years ago, especially as I became more involved in my search that led me eventually to Ananda. As far as other values, well, okay, maybe this one. It is okay to make your mistakes. You can use them as a learning tool. You don't have to live in regret and shame because
Yes.
you made a mistake. I mean, I think back to mistakes I made, things that I did, I would even call them more than just mistakes. And every so often, one of them comes to my mind. And I have to work sometimes to say, okay, but that was long ago. You don't do these things now. And to the extent that I can, I will try to make amends. Um, that would be an expansion. I don't think I was raised on that. I think that I cannot recall anything about treating mistakes and that sort of thing in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you, Prisha. One last message that you want to leave the audience with.
A message, well, um, not exactly a message, but I will say I got curious about your show. I mean, I know you, of course, and I've watched several others who I knew from EFL and Ananda who were on it. So I went to your website and I looked up your About Me, and I found out that on your show, you say that you try to bring people who have broken through a glass ceiling. And I was thinking, have I broken through a glass ceiling? I don't know. I I was thinking, if you think that, I am honored a little beyond where I think I should be. But I loved when I thought about your lovely analogy, a glass ceiling. Of course, we use it often for women breaking through a certain amount of difficulty they could have on the job or so forth. But when you look at it from a standpoint of consciousness, if we live in a glass building and it's darker at the bottom, but as we go up, there is more light. I certainly do not claim to have broken through a glass ceiling. I think of myself more as trying to do that, but I really love your analogy. And so I would say thank you, Anshu, for that beautiful analogy.
Thank you. And thank you. It was definitely an honor having you over here, Prisha, with your passion and the purpose that you're leading your life. You definitely are an example for a lot of people. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your, words of wisdom and your journey with us. Thank you. Have a good night. Hey, people. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation from the amazing Prisha Kirby, who has seen through, so many different phases of life and, has done so much of different stuff. And she's still so passionate about everything that she does. She is a perfectionist and she loves doing things her own way. So I have definitely been very, very appreciative of the way she is, and I felt that she would be able to add tremendous value to you people. I hope you felt the same way. So take time out, sit with yourself, take out your journals, write down your goals. What are you going to do to fulfill those goals? What are the tasks that you need to do? You have only 2 weeks left. So get set up and really, start taking massive actions towards the goals that you want to fulfill for yourself in the coming year. I wish that the new year is filled with all the success and all the happiness that you deserve in your life. Take care of yourself. I'll see you once again next week with another phenomenal and amazing guest. Bye bye. God bless you.